The casserole dish was still sitting on the counter when I found out my life had been hollowed out from the inside. I hadn't touched it since Thanksgiving. 3 weeks, and I still couldn't bring myself to wash it. My daughter-in-law had brought it over that day. Sweet potato with the little marshmallows on top, the kind my son used to beg me to make when he was 8 years old. She knew that. She'd ask me about it on purpose, I think, now. She wanted to seem like she cared. She wanted me to feel like she was trying. I want to tell you what kind of person I was before all of this. Not because I want your sympathy, but because I think it matters. I was the kind of woman who kept the spare key under the ceramic frog by the back door. Not hidden, really. Anyone who'd visited more than twice knew exactly where it was. I was the kind of woman who signed her name on the back of a check and handed it to her son without asking what it was for, because I trusted him the way you trust the floor beneath your feet. You don't think about it, you just step. I'm 64 years old. I retired 2 years ago after 31 years as a registered nurse. I worked nights when my son was small so I could be home during the day. I drove the carpool, I packed the lunches, I sat in the bleachers at every single soccer game, even when the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath. His father passed when my son was 16, and after that it was just the two of us. I used to think that meant we were close in a way other mothers and sons weren't. I used to think that was something special we had. I see now that I confused proximity with loyalty. I confused need with love. My son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, even now, even after everything, is 37. He married his wife 4 years ago at a small ceremony in Sedona, Arizona. She wore a white dress with embroidery at the hem, and I cried during the vows, the real kind of crying where you can't stop and you don't care who sees you. I thought she was going to be the daughter I never had. I thought my family was finally growing instead of shrinking. For the first year it was fine. Better than fine, actually. She'd call me on Saturday mornings just to talk. She sent me a card on my birthday that had a handwritten note inside, not just a signature. When I got my hip replaced last January, she drove me to the surgical center and sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. My son was in a work meeting he couldn't leave, apparently. She was there, though. She held my arm walking to the car. I thought she was kind. I thought I'd been lucky. The first sign I missed, and I've gone over this so many times since that I could recite it in my sleep, was the February before last. I'd been helping them financially since they got married. Nothing formal, nothing with paperwork. A check here and there. I helped with the down payment on their house in Scottsdale. I covered 3 months of car payments when my son got laid off. I floated their credit card bill twice, once when she had the medical procedure, and once when they went to Cabo and came back owing more than either of them would admit. I never asked for it back. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who kept score. In February I noticed something odd on my bank statement. I go over it the first of every month, same as I've done since I was 26. It's a habit from nursing. You learn to check things, to verify, to not assume the numbers are right just because they're printed. There was a withdrawal I didn't remember making. Not enormous. $312 from an ATM in a part of Phoenix I hadn't been to in months. I told myself I'd forgotten. I told myself I must have needed cash for something, and the memory had slipped. I was 64, I said to myself. These things happen. That was the first one. I didn't find the others until Thanksgiving. My son and his wife came over that Thursday with the casserole and a bottle of wine I'll never open. We had dinner. It was warm and loud in the good way. The way holidays used to feel when I was a child, and the table was too small for all the people around it. After we ate, my son fell asleep on the couch the way he always does. One arm over his eyes, shoes still on, and his wife offered to help me clean up. We stood at the sink together. She was talking about something, a renovation they were planning, a wall they wanted to take down in the kitchen. I was only half listening. Then she asked if I still had the same login for my online banking. I turned to look at her. She was drying a plate, not looking at me, her hands moving in slow circles with the dish towel. I said yes. I said it automatically, the way you answer questions that don't feel like questions yet. She nodded and changed the subject to her sister's new baby. I stood there at the sink with my hands in the water, and something moved through me that I can only describe as a cold draft through a room you thought was sealed. Not alarm exactly, not suspicion, just a feeling like the floor had shifted slightly beneath my feet. I didn't say anything. I finished the dishes. I hugged them both goodbye and watched their headlights pull out of the driveway. That night I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and I went through every statement I had going back 18 months. I'd like to tell you I was calm. I was not calm. By midnight I'd found 41 transactions I couldn't account for. They weren't huge amounts. The biggest was $800. Most were under $400, but 41 of them over 18 months added up to just under $14,000. $14,000 I had no memory of spending. $14,000 that had left my account in small, forgettable amounts, the kind that wouldn't trigger a flag, the kind that looked like ordinary life from a distance. Some of them were ATM withdrawals. Some were online transfers, listed only as account transfer, with no destination I could trace on my end. 3 of them were Venmo transactions, and when I looked up the recipient username, a generic string of letters and numbers I didn't recognize, I felt something harden in my chest. I sat at that table until 2 in the morning. Then I closed the laptop and I went to bed and I lay in the dark and I thought about the day she drove me to the surgical center. I thought about how she'd held my arm walking to the car. I thought about whether kindness can be a strategy, whether warmth can be something you wear. I didn't sleep. The next morning I called my son. He answered on the 3rd ring, groggy, probably still in bed. I told him I needed to talk to both of them. I kept my voice even. I said it wasn't an emergency, but it was important. He said okay, they'd come over Sunday. I said I'd make coffee. Sunday came. I'd printed the statement, all 41 pages, highlighted in yellow, with the dates circled in red. I put them in a folder, and I set the folder on the kitchen table, and I brewed a full pot of coffee, even though my hands were shaking so badly I spilled some of the grounds on the counter. They arrived at 11. My daughter-in-law was wearing a cream-coloured sweater, and her hair was down. She smelled like the perfume I'd given her for Christmas the year before. We sat at the table. I put the folder in the centre of it. I looked at my son first because I needed to see his face when he understood what we were talking about. I said I'd been going through my bank records. He said okay. I said I'd found something I needed help understanding. I opened the folder. I pushed the first few pages toward them. I didn't say another word. I let the numbers speak. My son picked up the pages. He looked at them for a long time. His face went through several things, confusion, and then something I couldn't name exactly, and then a careful blankness that I recognized as the look he'd worn as a teenager when he'd done something he knew I'd discovered. He used to get that look when he'd come home past curfew. Carefully blank, waiting to see what I knew before he decided what to say. His wife picked up her coffee cup. She didn't look at the papers. I said her name. Just her name, nothing else. She looked at me then. I said, I need you to tell me what happened to this money. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. It felt like standing on a roof. Then she said she didn't know what I was talking about. She said the numbers could be anything, old transactions I'd forgotten. It was a long time ago. Maybe I should talk to the bank. Her voice was steady and reasonable, the same voice she used when she talked about renovation plans or her sister's baby. Reasonable and warm and completely empty. My son said nothing. He set the papers down and he said nothing. I looked at him. I said, "Do you know about this?" He looked at the table. That was his answer. I felt something break inside me then, not dramatically, not all at once, more like a slow crack travelling through old plaster, the kind that starts small and moves while you're not watching until suddenly there's a gap you could put your fist through. I asked him how long. He said it was complicated. He said they'd been struggling. I didn't understand the kind of pressure they were under, the mortgage, her student loans from before they'd met, the costs of everything going up. He said he'd meant to pay me back. He said it had started as borrowing, and then it had, and then he stopped and didn't finish the sentence. I said, "You let her take it from me without asking." He didn't correct me. His wife stood up. She said she didn't have to sit here and be accused of anything. She said if I wanted to make this into something legal, then I should talk to a lawyer, but she wasn't going to sit at my kitchen table and be interrogated. She picked up her purse. She looked at my son and said his name, the way a teacher calls a child from a room. He stood up. I couldn't believe it. Even now, writing this, I cannot fully believe it. He stood up. I said, "Sit down, please." "We are not done." He said he was sorry. He said it the way you say I'm sorry for bumping into someone in a grocery store aisle, a reflex, weightless. Then they left. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the December light was doing what it does in Arizona in winter, thin and golden and not warm enough. The folder was still open on the table. 41 pages of evidence of what my own family had done to me while I wasn't looking. I called my bank on Monday morning and I reported the unauthorized transactions. The fraud department opened a case. They told me that because some of the transactions had patterns consistent with authorized access, meaning someone who had my login credentials, the investigation would take time. They froze the account and issued new credentials and a new card. They told me to file a police report. I filed the police report on Tuesday. The officer who took my statement was patient and thorough. He asked a lot of questions about the Venmo transactions because those were the most traceable. He told me to gather any other documentation I had, text messages, emails, anything in writing. I went home and I went through my phone and I found a text from 7 months ago where my daughter-in-law had asked me for my banking app password because she said she needed to transfer me money back for a birthday dinner she'd let me pay for and didn't want to hassle with Zelly. I had sent her the password in a text message because I trusted her, because she said she was paying me back. She never paid me back. She used the password to access my account from that day forward. I sat with that text message for a very long time. I thought about all the Saturday morning phone calls. I thought about the Thanksgiving casserole. I thought about her hand on my arm outside the surgical center. I did not text or call my son. He called me on Wednesday evening. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was 47 seconds long. He said he was worried about me. He said he hoped we could talk. He said he wanted to find a way to resolve things. He did not say his wife had taken my money. He did not say he was sorry for leaving. He did not say anything that sounded like a man who understood what he had done. I didn't call him back that week, or the next. The investigation moved slowly the way these things do. My bank was able to document 10 of the transactions as definitively unauthorized based on device fingerprinting and geolocation. The Venmo transfers were traced back to an account registered in my daughter-in-law's maiden name. The fraud investigator at the bank, a woman who I will be grateful to for the rest of my life, stayed on the case and kept me updated weekly. She told me carefully that the evidence was building. My attorney, I hired one in early December, told me we had a strong civil case and that the criminal complaint was viable given the digital evidence. She was direct and practical, and she did not treat me like an old woman who needed things explained slowly. I appreciated that. Christmas came and went. I didn't put up a tree. I've put up a tree every single year of my adult life, including the year my husband died. This was the first year I didn't. I didn't see the point of decorating an empty house for a holiday that now felt like a bruise. My son sent me a text on Christmas Day that said, "Merry Christmas, Mom. I hope you're doing okay. I love you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone in my kitchen drawer and I went and watched television. The criminal charges were filed in January. My daughter-in-law was charged with identity theft, unauthorized use of financial information, and theft over $10,000, a felony under Arizona state law. My son was not charged. The detective explained to me that based on the evidence, she had operated largely without his direct participation, though he had known and said nothing. Knowing and saying nothing, I was told, is not the same as participating. Legally, I already knew it wasn't the same. But some nights it felt worse. The trial was set for late February. In the weeks before it, my son called me 4 times. I took 2 of those calls. The first time he cried. He said he hadn't known how far it had gone. He said he'd been in denial. He said she'd told him the money was things I'd given them voluntarily, gifts that I'd offered. He said he'd wanted to believe her because believing her was easier than asking questions he didn't want the answers to. I listened to all of that. I didn't say much. The second call was shorter. He asked if I'd consider dropping the charges. He said his wife was scared. He said she might lose her job if she was convicted. He said he didn't know what would happen to their marriage if she went to prison, and I thought, you should have thought about all of that before. I didn't say that. I said I needed to go, and I hung up the phone. In court, the digital evidence was methodical and clear. The bank's forensic team presented the geolocation data showing the Venmo account had been accessed from my daughter-in-law's phone. The text message where she'd asked for my banking password was entered into evidence. A neighbour of mine testified that she'd seen my daughter-in-law at my house twice when I was not home. She'd thought at the time my daughter-in-law had a key, which she didn't. I had never given her one. The ceramic frog by the back door had one. I'd forgotten about that. My daughter-in-law's attorney argued that the money represented informal loans I'd voluntarily made and later mischaracterized. He argued that the password sharing was consensual and ongoing. He argued that there was ambiguity in the nature of our financial relationship. My attorney put me on the stand. I was asked about my nursing career, my retirement income, my financial management habits, my monthly bank reviews. I answered every question clearly. I have been on my feet in emergency rooms for 31 years. A witness stand did not frighten me. The jury deliberated for 6 hours over 2 days. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was held 6 weeks later. My daughter-in-law received 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory restitution of the full $14,000, and 200 hours of community service. She was not sentenced to prison time, which I will admit was not what I wanted. But the conviction stands. The restitution is court-ordered. She will pay it back. My son called me the evening of sentencing. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, and I let the phone ring, and I looked at his name on the screen for a long moment. Then I answered. He didn't say hello. He said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix it. I needed you to hear me say it." I said, "I know, sweetheart." He started crying then, not the controlled kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. I let him cry. I didn't fill the silence with comfort. I just let it be what it was. After a while, he said, "Is there any way forward?" I thought about that. I thought about 37 years of his life and 31 years of mine spent working nights so he could have days. I thought about soccer games and carpool and a casserole dish sitting on my counter for 3 weeks. I thought about a hand on my arm outside a surgical center that turned out to be worth exactly $14,000 to the person attached to it. I said, "I don't know yet, but I'm still here." That was true. That was the most I could offer him. I hung up the phone and I sat in the parking lot until the light changed. Then I drove myself home, pulled into the garage and went inside to a house that was quiet and mine and safe. I made myself a cup of tea. I washed the casserole dish that had been sitting on the counter since November, and I put it away in the cabinet where it belonged. I don't know what happens next with my son. I don't know if his marriage survives what his wife did, what he allowed to happen. I don't know if we get back to something that resembles what we were. I am 64 years old, and I have learned not to make promises about the future because the future has a way of arriving as something other than what you expected. What I know is this: I checked the lock on the back door and moved the spare key. I meet with my bank every month now, in person, not just online. I have an attorney I trust, I have neighbours who pay attention, and I know that the floor is still beneath my feet, unsteady in some places, cracked in others. But still there. That's enough to step on, for now.